Okay. So this is our first. A very good morning to you. This is me again, Dr. Sameh, and this is EA300B, and I'm here today for this morning in my capacity as the coordinator of the course. This is a master class, not a regular class. With master classes, we normally have I mean more than one class. It's the class that I teach if I teach the course, and the classes of other teachers. So what is it that let's have an outline. Let's explain first of all why we have master classes, and then how it goes, how it unfolds as we proceed. So master classes are meant to help you. It complement the efforts of your teachers in your regular classes. It tries to answer all the questions that you may have, and sometimes your teachers don't find sufficient time to answer you fully. So this is why we're here in the master classes, answering all your questions, going out of our ways, and explaining and clarifying things even more. Master classes are also supposed to be interactive. It should be me saying things and you reacting, you saying things and me reacting. It should be interactive, and I shouldn't be monopolizing the conversation. So let's get started. Ala barakatillah. This is our first master class, and inshallah, it's not going to end. We meet every Thursday at 8 a.m. I know it may be a little early for some of us, and it's the end of the week, and normally weeks are long and they are tiring and everything in between, but let's make it short and sweet. Short and sweet means that again, I'm stressing the idea of interactiveness, the fact that it has to be bi-directional. You say something and I react to that, and I give you prompts and you also react. It's about setting uh, activities in motion. It's about stimulating your curiosity, your intellect, about the things that we do in regular class. We've been doing, regular classes for the second week or for 2 weeks. Remember, we started the course and you started with your teachers if you belong to another teacher last week. And we did have classes this week, which means that you have some background if you haven't, officially and seriously, if you haven't started engaging with the material yet because you haven't started studying, or perhaps you were busy doing this or that, at least you have some kind of background about what is going on. And what is going on so far is all about picture books, the two picture books that we're doing. And by the two picture books, I mean, of course, the Tale of Peter Rabbit and Voices in the Park. And of course, the background to them, which means that we spoke about what, children's literature is, and even the history of picture books and children's literature. This is something that I did in my class yesterday, and I'm sure Dr. Mohsen and Dr. Arwa did in their classes over the past 2 weeks. So the focus yesterday was also on Peter, or the tale of Peter Rabbit, the different interpretations, and also the idea of the inseparability of the picture. The picture is no longer an embellishment or there on the page for decoration or for embellishment purposes. The picture is as important as the word. So this is what we've been hitting on for so long, And this is what should bear fruit in terms of giving you uh, more ideas about the text. Your examination of the picture can inform what you understood from the text and from the word. So we're talking about this harmony that should exist between the picture and the text. I remember that I asked people to go and read the text again, keeping in mind all the things that we spoke about in our discussions. So have you done that? Are you all, whether you belong to my class or my colleagues' classes, are you done reading the Tale of Peter Rabbit? Have you read it? Those who belong to my class read it in my class, and we read it together, but I expect people to have read it again. So, are we all on the same page? Have we all read the Tale of Peter Rabbit? Raise your hand. Just raise your hand. Those who have read, raise your hand.
You mean the story or the article that you
No, no,
explained yesterday?
no, I'm talking about the story. I'm talking about the visual narrative itself, the Tale of Peter Rabbit, not the second. Perhaps this is a good, chance to make this distinction between primary sources and secondary sources. When I talk about primary sources, I talk about the text itself, the tale of Peter Rabbit itself, okay, which what I'm asking about. And then you have the secondary sources. The secondary sources are the critical material, the essays and the articles that you should read so that you can perhaps understand the story more. You can also back up ideas that you may have about the story. Those articles and essays can help you even, make your can help make your arguments very strong and documented as well. So again, my back to my original question about whether we all have read the Tale of Peter Rabbit, the primary source. Raise your hand if you have done that. Okay. Okay. So the reason why I'm asking, because I want us all to be on the same page. I don't want to retell the story because there is obviously no story to tell. It's a storyline that is very basic if you look at it this way, but the pictures, like I said, uh, um, are very important. That's why it may make you think twice. So if you're reading the text, the words themselves, they can take perhaps 15 minutes or 10 minutes. But if you're reading the text and the corresponding pictures, you can take more than that because you're going to think, you're going to relate the picture to the text. You try to stop and think of the correspondence between the text and the picture, and that can make the reading perhaps more useful and also more enjoyable. Okay, Leanne, drop your hand, please. Okay, so it's what we started with um, was the idea of picture books and how different picture books are from mainstream literature. When we talk about mainstream literature, we normally talk about novels and short stories. And of course, novels and short stories are not illustrated. They don't have pictures in them. And if they do, the pictures are there for embellishment purposes. They are not meant for you as a reader to dwell so heavily and so much on them. No, well, this is not the main concern of a mainstream novel or a short story. Okay, but if I talk about picture book, I talk about a book, and the associations of a book would be that you have words, you have phrases, you have sentences, you have paragraphs, and so on. So this is the book part of the picture book. And then you have picture, we're saying picture book, which means that the pictures are there, and which means that the pictures should be reckoned with. They are a force to reckon with. They are very important if you aim at a full understanding and a full appreciation of the picture book. So even the word picture book is very suggestive and very indicative of what kind of book we have. It's a book, it is true, which has words and phrases and sentences, but it is also full of relevant pictures, pictures that are very relevant to the experience on the page. And we spoke about um, pictured books as being part of children's literature, and we spoke about how children's literature down through the ages was not taken very seriously. For people down through the ages, literature written for adults and about adults was more important. So that's why publishers wouldn't invest much on picture books and also on children's literature. But over time, people started to realize that picture books and children's literature in general is um, can be serious, can be also used to communicate ideas to children, for example, and those ideas can help. Can help you normally, as a child, get your information. In the past, it was only books and magazines, and of course, your parents and how they communicate to you. Now, of course, we have the internet and YouTube and the other social networking platforms. But in the past, it's the parents, and then with the parents, you would need a book. So the book would be illustrated. It would have pictures. Like I said, over time, it started to gain momentum, and people started to realize that children's literature can help as a source of entertainment and also as a source of instruction. It can educate people, especially children. And they started to take interest in the design, to make the design more appealing, to make it even more quality, until we arrive at the 19th century, where there is obviously uh, a change of attitude towards children's literature. Children's literature came to their own. They started to appeal to people. And this was, of course, part of a reading revolution. If we talk about the English people, they had a number of education acts that entrenched the love for reading, and part of what people used to read would be children's literature. And then we had the early 20th century, where children's literature became a fact, and became a normal thing, and started to have, this separation and independence. When we talk about the author and also the illustrator. In the past, the illustrator was not very important, the one who draws. The focus was more on the writer, but not anymore, I promise you. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, um, and from there forward, the illustrator became as important as the writer. If the illustrator sometimes, and for the most part, you would have the writer who happens to be also an illustrator. They work together, they have the same vision, and the two of them are very important in the eyes of the readers. And then you have a number of generations um, when it comes and signposts when it comes to readers, children's literature. We'll talk about that when the time is right. Now let me go to the representative picture book that we have. The representative picture book that we have is The Tale of Peter Rabbit. And The Tale of Peter Rabbit, away from the 2 weeks that we've been engaged um, with it in, is something that it's like a household story or picture book. If we haven't done it here over the past 2 weeks, we may have heard about it, may have had it read for us when we were kids. So the story is very simple and is also all over the place. So we're not going to visit the story or revisit the story rather, because we all know the storyline. Unless you don't know. Who doesn't know about the Tale of Peter Rabbit, the storyline, the plot? If you haven't heard about it so far, raise your hand. Um, it's okay. If you don't know, just tell us that you don't know. So we're good. All of us know what the story is. But let's talk about it as if it is a narrative, mind you. And when I say it's a narrative, means that it is a story with what the word story conjures up at the back and evokes at the back of our mind, which means that you have a storyline, you have characters, you have setting, you have point of view, right? These are the elements of any story, of any narrative, and we have been exposed to them in the so many novels and short stories that we have done together. Not me, over the years. You have done Wuthering Heights, you have done the Sign of Four. What other novels have you done? Just to remember any of them?
Yeah, but the the man who who goes to, who who travels to an island, who traveled to an island. What was
Yeah,
it
I
was
know
about.
that. I don't remember. The Beach of Felisa.
Yes.
Yes, this is also one of the novellas. Yes, right. And also you had a whole course on short stories. It's critical appreciation, and part of it was the short story section in it. What I'm trying to say is that you guys know what a narrative is, what a novel is. So if we look at the Tale of Peter Rabbit as a narrative, it has characters, it has a plot, a storyline, it has a setting, and it has also point of view. Where is the narrative headed, and what kind of narrative is it omniscient or semi-omniscient? So, things like that. So let's break it down to its basic components in terms of elements, and then we talk about thematic issues. So let's talk about the characters. Come to the mic and tell me how many characters there are and who they are, and name them if you can. Raise your hand. The characters of the Tale of Peter Rabbit. Raise your hand. We're talking about the characters. Whoever comes will tell us who those characters are, their names. Yeah, and that would be it. Only one person knows. Because I asked you whether you have read and you said you did. Isn't that strange? I said, yeah, please try to be more, um, what? More active? Yes. Okay, so let's talk about the characters. Zuhur.
Yes, there is Peter, uh,
Okay, Peter,
his mom, his three
his
sisters.
mom, his mom. Does his mom have a name in the story?
No,
No.
Miss
Okay. And then three sisters. Do you still remember the names of those three sisters?
uh,
That's fine. If you don't know, that's fine.
right, yeah, the name.
Okay. One of
And
them was called Floppy, I think.
yeah, Floppy
Okay.
and
Yeah, can
Mimi.
somebody help us with the names, please? The names of Peter's sisters. Raise your hand. Yeah, Layan, do you still remember the names?
Flopsy, Mopsy,
Flopsy.
Cottontail.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Okay, what other characters do we have, Zuhur? Okay,
Uh,
yeah, go
Mac,
ahead.
yeah, Mr. Mac something.
Yeah, McGregor.
Yeah,
Ma
McGregor.
yes.
Yeah, and there is the
And
I think the cousin of the Peter Rabbit.
okay. And we also have a bunch of birds. We have um, a mouse, right? Okay. So as you can see, it's a narrative, like any other narrative, obviously. Uh, but we have, and we also have characters because it's a narrative, right? But when you look at Peter, his mom, and his sisters, um, and how they are presented on or in the pictures, uh, they are not human beings, even though they behave like human beings. They obey, they disobey, they behave and they misbehave, they give orders and receive orders, exactly like human beings, but they are not human beings, right? They are what? They are what?
Animals.
Animals, okay. So you have, for the most part, animals. So you have a narrative where, for the most part, you have animals. So animals are a majority, while the human beings involved are a minority, like Mr. McGregor, right? So what do we call this kind of work where animals are the characters? This is we it
Fable.
had yeah, we call it a fable. Yeah, very good. And this is part of a trend in literature. This is part of um, I wouldn't say a technique. This is part of a category in literature that we call anthropomorphism. So when we refer to the tale of Peter Rabbit, we say that it is an anthropomorphic piece of work, which means that you have um, characters who are not human beings; they are animals, but they behave like human beings. This is called anthropomorphism, and the tale of Peter Rabbit is an anthropomorphic piece of work. Um, okay, do we have precedents in history when we say that it is a fable where animals are the characters? Where with fables you normally have a moral lesson at the end. Is this a new invention? Obviously, the answer is no. This kind of uh, genre where animals are the characters, is deep or deeply rooted in history. It goes as far back as Aesop. And Aesop is a Greek fabulist, is a Greek writer who started this art form of animals speaking and behaving like human beings in narratives. And even in Arabic and Muslim literature, we have a precedent. We have that. If you're familiar with um, in Arabic, or yeah, you have Kalila و Dimna by Ibn al-Muqaffa.
Yes.
You have in Persian literature, they have Mantiq al-Tayr, or the Conference of Birds, a very amazing piece of work too. And I'm sure in other cultures, if we have people from India or Pakistan here, they may have their own fables. Okay, so it's not a new invention. It's not something that Beatrice Potter started. It has always been there. Okay, so we're saying that this is an anthropomorphic piece of work where animals, are the characters. And then comes the idea whether, perhaps I should delay this, talking about it, whether it has a moral lesson, whether it's direct or not. Let's talk about that a little later. What we're doing now is that we're breaking down the narrative into its basic components, and one of those components is the characters. So we're agreed on the characters and who they are and what their names are. Let's move to the setting. And whenever we talk about the setting in a narrative, we talk about time and place. Let's focus on the place. So do we have only one place or more than one place?
More than
More than one place.
Yes. It's obviously you have uh, the novel or the narrative starts and ends in this tree, or perhaps under this tree where the family is. I mean, the family of Peter, his mother, and his sisters. He starts there and he ends there, right? And there is another place. Well, what is the other place that we have in the narrative?
Mr. McGregor's garden.
Yeah, it's the garden of Mr. McGregor. Okay. Um, we'll talk about the significance of place because obviously places can be there for background purposes, and they can also be very important and significant to the extent that they can be given active roles. They can help the event's progress. And when we talk about places, um, in an animal world like the one that we have in this narrative, we may talk about the idea of nature and what happens in nature and who owns the land in nature. When we talk about nature, we talk more about animals or human beings. I'm asking you. When we talk about outside nature, we
I
talk
think
more.
animals.
Yeah, we talk more about animals. Okay, so animals live more in nature. Where do we live? We ourselves. We live in towns and cities, right? And even if we live in nature, we take part of nature, a piece of land, and we build a house on it. So, who is foreign to nature? Who is a guest to nature? Animals or human beings?
Human beings.
Human beings, right? So human beings, when they go and live in nature, what do you expect them to do? To behave themselves and be nice, or to possess the land and say this is ours and dispossess other animals? What do you think? What should they do? Behave and be respectful and nice, or
They should behave.
yeah, do they behave?
Not really,
No.
no.
Not really, right? So who has more claim to the land, Peter and his family or Mr. McGregor?
Peter and his family.
Okay, let's leave it there. We'll come back to it. Okay, so this is the setting, and this is the shift from wherever Peter and his family live to Mr. McGregor's garden. Okay, so this is the setting. So we started off with characters and then we moved to the setting. How about the plot? We're familiar with the plot. Can somebody tell us the plot? What happened when? Which means that somebody's going to retell us the story in a few sentences. Who can do that? Somebody that I don't know, somebody that we haven't heard before, perhaps from another class. Do you have people from other classes? I know, for example, that Zuhur belongs to my class, Sarab, Layan, Aisha. Maya, I don't know whether Maya belongs with me or not. Lana, I don't know. Jude, Ola, Rania belongs to my class. Okay, Aisha, yeah, go ahead.
The plot is speaking about morals and
No, no,
obeying
no, this
rules.
is Aisha, I'm sorry.
Yes,
What you're
go ahead.
saying is interpretation.
Okay.
You're telling us about the meaning of the story. Do I want you to give us the meaning and the
No, you want
significance?
the plot.
The plot. The plot means that somebody did what and when, right?
Uh,
Are you still
yes,
familiar with the story?
yes.
Okay. Can you give us some
Uh,
kind of yeah?
Peter
Go ahead.
Rabbit went into Mr. Gregor's farm,
Mm-hmm.
garden, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and he ate the fruits, and he was caught by Mr. Gregor, and then he was set free. And then he got sick,
Mm-hmm.
and he was stripped out of his jacket,
Mm-hmm.
and he couldn't eat supper with his sisters and brothers and mother. He had to drink chamomile tea.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. This is the
You're welcome.
storyline in very you're welcome in very simple terms. It's about this boy. I mean, Peter. Obviously, he is a rabbit, and he was. They woke up like all animals and people in the morning, and their mother obviously wanted to go perhaps to the market, and before she went, she gave them instructions. She said, "You guys play around and do this and that, but never go to Mr. Matt Kruger's God." She was clear in her instructions, and the girls obeyed. The boy, Peter, decided to go to Mr. McGregor's garden. Before she left, she said, and this was very implicit, it was indirect, that their father had an accident over there. She didn't specify. The only thing that she said that he was made into a pie in a matter of fact way. So she left and they dispersed. The next thing you know is that Peter decides to go to Mr. McGregor's garden. He goes, he eats, and he was seen by Mr. McGregor, and the chase started. He managed eventually to run away and escape. And when he went home, he was, of course, exhausted because he risked his own life. And his mom gave him chamomile tea in order to nurse him back to health. And that was it. So, as you can see, it's very simple and very straightforward. What is not simple or straightforward would be the ideas coming out of this very small encounter between a human being and an animal. And the animal, of course, is portrayed as very small, and the human being is presented as huge and gigantic for us to think and draw conclusions about that. So, this is the storyline. And then you have the idea of point of view. It's a narrative after all. So it is given from, whenever we talk about narrative, we talk about first person or uh, a third person. So from your experience when you read, was it first person, which means one of the characters is narrating and is saying I? Have you seen I in the picture book? I did this,
No.
I didn't. No. So
No,
if it's
doctor.
so if it's not I, it has to be he or
The
she or
narrator.
they, right? Third person narrative, right? Which what it is, right? It was third person narrative. Okay,
Yes.
nice. So we'll leave it there. So this is the element, the elements of a story, and they apply very much to the Tale of Peter Rabbit because it's a narrative. Right. Let's go beyond those elements and talk about significance and meaning. And obviously, the meaning is up for grabs. I mean, the interpretation can be uh, uh, big and varied. I mean, it depends on our background. It depends on how much we read into the narrative and uh, how much philosophy we can engage the narrative in. So it can be as simple as a story that is meant to give a moral lesson. Can be read in this very juvenile, very childish way. You have an author who is trying to give children a moral lesson. What is the moral lesson? A moral lesson would be that if your mom says something, you have to act on it. You have to obey your mom or your parents no matter what. This is as simple as it gets. But is it as simple as this? Are we going to read it this way? If we're going to read it this way, we might as well not read it because we're not children, right? Um,
Yes.
and we leave it to children, right? We said that part of children's literature now is the fact that it has gained readership across demographics. Across demographics means that it's not only children that read children's literature, it can be others. So it is true that for the most part, children are the agents and the actors and the players and the characters, but the concerns may go far beyond the immediate and the petty and the small. Okay, so we're going to read this picture book um, in a bigger light. We're going to perhaps explore it more, and we can think of archetypes. We can think of universal ideas coming out of it. So when we talk about the idea of disobedience, so a child disobeying his mom, we can take this idea of disobedience to new heights and new dimensions and refer to the first disobedience ever. And the first disobedience ever would be the disobedience of Adam and Eve. Remember that story?
Yes.
So you can think about it this way. When you think also of the boy or Peter disobeying his mom, and his mom is obviously bigger than him, his mom can be considered as a figure of authority. Okay. And it can be, I mean, the relationship can be symbolic of a relationship between an authority and people who have to obey this kind of authority, and whether they should negotiate terms with this authority or not, whether they should say yes all the time to this kind of authority, or sometimes they should stop and think and say why I'm doing this. This authority can be many things. It can be the government, it can be the parents, it can be religion, it can be our traditions. So normally, in the face of authority, we normally say yes, sam'an wa ta'a, right? But perhaps the writer is trying to tell us, no, sometimes you need to say, not say no, but at least question and argue and say why this and why not that. That can be an interpretation, right? Um, Remember when we started, I said that it can, the narrative can be about the relationship between a colonizer and colonized people, where obviously Mr. McGregor would be the colonizer, and you know, Peter and his family would be the colonized, or any animals in this piece of land for that matter. Okay, so who is laying claim to the land and whether he or she is justified or not? This can be also an issue, right? Um, Look at also the story. Remember, we said we started by saying that it can be about giving a moral lesson. It can be about perhaps teaching people about responsibility and consequence. And what do I mean by that? Look at Peter, for example, and what happened to him. So he disobeyed his mom, he went to the garden, and it all went wrong. It didn't go as he planned, perhaps. I don't know whether he planned something or not, but perhaps it didn't go as he wished. He wanted to go there, eat, and then come back. Nobody knows about it, right? This was his original intention, but did it go this way? All bad things happened, right? McGregor discovered him and ran after him. He wanted to kill him like he killed his father, right? Okay, so perhaps on if you focus on the character of Peter, we may think that Peter is learning something. Peter and his elk, whoever is in, uh, whoever is Peter's age can learn this lesson about responsibility and about consequence. It's about, thinking ahead, planning. It's about measuring and calculating, right? You don't just do
Follow the rule.
something without thinking of the consequences. Aisha, you're saying something.
Yes, doctor. I was saying following rules and not being impulsive.
Yes. Impulsiveness can be good sometimes. Sometimes you ask people to be natural, to stay away from artificiality, especially when it comes to expressing your feelings to others. You need to be genuine, not fake. But if we're talking about projects and plans, you have to plan ahead. You need to think of the consequences, right? So this is obviously something that Peter is going to think of when he goes back home and when he recovers. Do you think that he will do, if he is given the opportunity, would he do it again after what he has gone through?
No, he won't.
He
No.
won't,
Course
right?
not.
He went through a lot, right? He almost lost his life in the process. So the narrative can be read as such. It's about learning a lesson. It's about growing mentally and intellectually. It's about maturity, becoming more mature, right? Don't you think that this can also be uh, one of the things that we can think of when it comes to this kind of novel? Not a novel. It's not a novel. I'm sorry. It's a picture book. It's a visual narrative, to be more specific. Narrative because it
What
has a
was your
story,
question? Sorry?
and visual because it has images in it. Yeah. Um,
What was your question? Sorry?
I'm not asking. You know, and it's part of the conversation that we're having about the significance of what happened and the lessons that people are likely to take away from this narrative. And one of them would be the idea of growth, the idea of maturity, the fact that Peter at the end is not the Peter that we meet at the beginning. Do you think he is the same? Did he change? Likely, because we don't know. We don't know whether he done, but obviously we may, as readers, we may change. When we see Peter having all those kinds of hardships, we perhaps need to think twice before we step. Like Aisha said, we need to steer away and avoid steer away from and avoid impulsiveness. And impulsiveness means that you act, and then after you act, you think. Who or which should come first? You think and then act, or you act and then think? I'm asking everyone.
Think
No.
and then
I think
You,
first and
yeah, you think
act.
first and then act afterwards. So
Sometimes we
obviously,
can
yeah, go ahead.
sometimes we cannot think first. We just act and then we think like Peter.
Um, yeah, sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't work, right? Sometimes ربنا بيستر يعني, right? But not all the time. You need to think first, right? Because sometimes when you act and then think afterwards, you have feelings of regret. Why did I do that? I should have, because we don't have control Z in life. Do we have, are you familiar with this? And you have your keyboard in front of your eyes and you write something, right? When you type something and it's wrong, you can press Control Z and you undo it, right? But do we have that in life? Do we have Control
No.
Z in life?
No,
Sometimes
of
we don't.
course.
No, sometimes we don't. So obviously, Peter does not have a keyboard and he doesn't have Control Z. So whatever happened, happened. So the lesson would be that you need to think and then behave or act. It's about calculating the consequences, thinking you need to start from the end, like they say. Start from the end, not from the beginning. And this is one of the lessons that people may take away from. So the idea of maturity, the idea of growth. Peter grew, and by growing, we don't mean he grew physically, because he remains the Peter that we know. I mean, rabbits don't grow, right? You see him at the beginning, he is physically the same at the end. So what kind of growth and what kind of Uh,
Mentally
Obviously,
grow.
we're talking about mental growth, right? We're talking about being more responsible, being more consequential, being more calculating when you behave, right? So these are very interesting ideas that I'm hopeful that you also find them interesting.
Doctor, can
Yes.
Peter's act when he went to the garden, can it be considered as stealing? Because the Mr. McGregor, he grows the vegetables and take care of it, and Peter comes and eat from it. So is it like stealing?
It can be interpreted in different ways, and one of them would be the idea that this is, yeah, this in a sense that can be stealing, but this is something that you can tell to a child. But if we're grown up, and I think it can be bigger than that. Who is the bigger stealer? Remember when I said when I spoke about this colonizer colonized relationship? Remember when we established the fact that the land belongs more to the animals than to the human beings, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So in this case, uh, uh, um, Peter is moving around in what he thinks is his his land. This is nature, his hema. يعني in old Arabic بيسموها الحمى, okay? Where there is no boundaries, no artificial boundaries. You can't say this is my land and this is yours. This is all artificial. This is what Mr. Kruger and his people bring, but animals don't know about that. They just move around, eating from here and there, right? So it is stealing and it is not stealing, you know. So if we are locked in this stealing game, we need to think of the original stealer, right? And in this case, Mr. McGregor would be the big stealer ever as a colonizer, right? Um, okay. So these are some of the ideas that people engage in every time we talk about Peter, Peter and his family, the whole story. There is also, whenever you talk about Peter as a story and Peter as a character, and of course his family and his sisters, you think of this idea of values, the fact that you have a number of values, and you see whether he the characters live up to those values, whether they uphold those values or they subvert them, they go against them. Okay. Just to remember when this narrative was published. When was it published? Just to remember.
no, doctor, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Diana.
In 1902.
Yeah, in 1902, which makes it Victorian, which makes it part of the Victorian times and the Victorian age. So, how much do we know about the Victorian age? We know that it was a time of rigidity in everything. People were very conservative. Conservative means that they have certain values and they keep them, they uphold them. The idea of respectability, for example, you have to respect authority, for example. You have to obey your parents, one of the values, no matter what. You have to be moral. You shouldn't steal, for example. I think that applies across the ages. You have to behave in rigid ways. You should um, do it when it comes to the Victorians. Again, I was stressing the fact, this idea of obedience. You have to be obedient. You have to be law abiding. So those are some of them. And you have to be conservative. Conservative means that, I mean, liberal ideas do not exist. You shouldn't come up with your own ideas. See what the traditions are and follow those traditions, no matter what, even if you don't agree with them. So these are Victorian values. And the narrative is, because it was published in 1902, is part of those values. So now, what are some of the values, some of those Victorian values that apply and that we should see in this narrative? It's the idea of, child-parent relationship. And according to Victorians, or the Victorians, if you are a child, your mother and your father have absolute control over you. You have to absolutely obey them, no matter what. Whatever they say, you do. There is no room for disobeying or saying no. You have to be also conservative in your views. You have to obey authority, whether it's the parents or the government or religion or whatever the case is. Okay, so those are the Victorian values. And because the Tale of Peter Rabbit is part of the Victorian age, it should follow them. My question now is whether those values are upheld by the characters or subverted. Subverted means that the characters do not obey them, do not follow those values, do not uphold them. So this is my question to you. What do you think? Are the Victorian values upheld in this narrative?
No, subverted.
Yeah, they are subverted. Okay, let's agree. Remember, there is more to the tale of Peter Rabbit than just Peter. We have other characters, right?
Yeah,
So
I think
we cannot wait. We cannot simply say that they are subverted and we only talk about Peter, or we cannot say that they are upheld and we only talk about his sisters. Let's look at the thing in its totality. Which of the values is subverted and which of them is upheld? Okay? Yeah. So those who believe. So let's talk about upholding those values. Who of the characters are upholding those values? Upholding means obeying them and following them. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. It's very unfortunate that only two people are reacting because we're many and I know that you guys know. Come to the mic and don't deny us this. Let's make it interactive. Let's make it a debate where I say something and you disagree with me, and you say something and I agree or disagree. Let's make it vibrant, ya جماعة. I can only see two people, Leanne and Zuhur, which is obviously not what I have in mind about a vibrant, interactive class. Come to the mic, fear nothing. Nobody's going to tax or judge you. Okay, Leanne, go ahead. So again, we're talking about, back to the idea, we're talking about those who uphold Victorian values in the narrative. Yalla, go ahead.
The sisters, called
Mm.
Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, they 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 uphold the Victorian values,
Yeah,
but Peter
in doing what? In doing what?
obeying their
Yeah,
mother.
very good. Yeah, in obeying their mother. Yes. How about the
But
mother?
Peter
The mother is a figure of authority. She wants what? She is also an upholder of Victorian values, right?
Yes.
Okay, and she expects her son to also obey and uphold those values, right? Okay,
Yes.
okay, nice, very good. Zuhur, there is also a measure of subversion of those values. Somebody is not upholding them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, Peter. Uh,
Mm.
he's not obeying his mother.
Which he should, right? Remember,
Yeah,
as part of the values of the Victorian age, if your mother says something, you have to do it, right?
yeah. And
Ah.
it shows in the story that if you obey, like the girls, they obey their mother, and then in the end, they eat food and drinks and enjoy their time.
Hmm.
But Peter, he didn't obey, and in the end, he just drink the tea, chamomile tea, and he sleep. He didn't enjoy like them the food and eat.
Yeah, which keeps this idea open. You don't know whether the writer is promoting this. Do you think if this is how we settle for, if this is our interpretation of what happens, do you think in this way Beatrice Potter is trying to promote those values or to say no, we shouldn't uphold them?
Maybe he
If,
just has the option to, like, we can obey or we can just uh, like figure life and do adventures and stuff like this. Like maybe encouraging some people to do whatever they want, and then they will maybe be safe in the end.
okay, so this is perhaps referring us to something very interesting, which is called moral ambiguity. The end is locked in moral ambiguity. Moral ambiguity means that you cannot safely say whether this is punishment or or what it is. You don't know whether what happened at the end when the girls are eating all kinds of food and the boy is reduced to um, a sick individual who only has access to chamomile tea, whether this is punishment, whether, I mean, the fact that he came back, alhamdulillah, safe, this is a victory in and of itself. This is what we refer to as moral ambiguity. I mean,
It can,
the writer is not very explicit. It's not very clear on that, according to some critics. And also the idea of theft and stealing. There is also a moral ambiguity, element to it. The fact that we don't know whether what Peter did and the fact that he ate something that is not his own and then he got sick, whether this was also punishment for his theft, or we can think in grander terms and we say that Mr. McGregor is the biggest thief ever. The fact that he is taking a land that is not his own. So think of this idea of moral ambiguity that we are faced with. Again, it's one of the ideas that is floating in the air every time discussion starts about the tale of Peter Rabbit. So again, let's go back to the original idea. We're talking about the subversion of values. What values? Victorian values. And we're saying that in a sense, there is a subversion, and in a sense, there is some kind of upholding of those values upon the part of the sisters and even the mother. But Peter obviously is the protagonist, is a big subverter, what's the verb? Subverter from subversion. Yeah, he subverted it all. He subverted authority. He challenged authority, um, whether the authority of the mother, whether the authority of human beings, because human beings are always presented as more elevated and higher than animals, right? They have ascendancy over the other creatures, if you like. So this is one of the ideas that you need to think of and about. Okay.
Okay.
So, um, so the sisters are typical, which means that they are presented as along typical gender lines, very submissive and very obedient. But there is still a subversion when you look at the mother. So, who subverts those values? It's not only Peter, it's also the mother, because the mother is presented as strong, as a figure of authority. And the subversion is not done by the mother, it is done by the author. And that would leave us with this kind of ambiguity. We don't know whether the author is liberal or conservative, right?
Yes.
Okay. Again, we come back to the idea of adventure and how this adventure can contribute to Peter's growth and maturation. So, who embarks on this adventure, and whose growth and whose maturation are we talking about? I'm asking everyone. So, I'm saying that there is adventure involved in this narrative. So if you have an adventure, you would ask about the one who embarks on this kind of adventure. And if there is growth and maturity at the end, you need to ask whose maturity and whose growth are we talking about? Can somebody come to the mic and tell us about that? Whose adventure are we talking about? Who is engaged in this kind of adventure? No one? Okay, go ahead. Leanne?
Peter.
Yeah, of course, it's Peter. Peter engages in this kind of adventure. Okay. When he did what? This is adventure. When he did what?
When he went to when he disobeyed his mother, and
No,
then
no, no. Disobeying his mother is not adventure.
yeah, I mean when he went to Mr. McGregor garden and
So
explore
what's
it.
wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong with what is so adventurous about going to another place?
Um, Exploring new things, trying new things.
Yeah, and also
Um,
when we talk about adventure, we talk about a measure and an element of risk. Did he take any risks? Was it risky going there, Yalayan?
yeah, because Yeah,
Yes.
because he was nearby Mr. McGregor.
Yeah, because they have also experience with this guy. This guy killed their father. So obviously it was risky and very dangerous to go there, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So this is the adventure that we're talking about. And who is going to learn from this adventure and the risks taken? Who is going to be mature and who is going to grow at the end?
Himself, Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandy, hi, how are you?
Hello, doctor.
Hi. Are you following or what? Have you just arrived or you've been there
No,
for
I've been
long?
here, but I was a little bit late.
That's fine. Okay. Okay, so whose maturity and growth are we talking about? Leanne, let's continue with me.
Peter himself.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah, Peter himself, perhaps us as readers too, right? So we're talking about us and of course Peter. So, but we're not likely to see how far he changed because the narrative ended, right?
Yes.
But what is sure is that we as readers are going to think about what happened and we may kind of learn a thing or two. One of the things that we would learn would be that we should calculate, we should think before we act. Remember, we said that obviously Peter acted and then thought. And when you act and then think, you have remorse and regret. You feel regretful over something. When in life, like I said, we don't have control Z. We don't have keyboards and we move around, and every time we make a mistake, we press uh, uh, Control Z and we undo our mistakes. Are we allowed to undo our mistakes in exams, for example? You go to the exam and you answer in a certain way, and yet then you go home and you remember something and you remember that you said or you have written something wrong. Do we have Control Z? Can you go back and or undo that? Are we
No.
allowed to do that? No, obviously no. So it's the same thing with Peter. He cannot undo. I don't know whether he can be convinced because we have so many Peters around. I myself can be a Peter. If you ask me whether you agree with what he did, I would say yes, I agree because he is obviously defying authorities. He is rebellion, and this is perhaps part of my nature. But if you talk about normal people like you, say no, he should have obeyed his mom. Why did he do that? See what happened to him, right? So the bottom line is that life does not provide you with control Zs. So the lesson to be taken would be that you need to be cautious, you need to be careful, you need to calculate, you need to plan ahead, right? So this is the idea of maturity and growth that all the time we're talking about. That's why when they talk about this picture book, they say it is part of the traditions of coming of age literature. Coming of age means that the character matures, that the character learns a lesson or two, and he is at the end totally different from when you have seen him or her at the beginning. And we have so many examples, and we have seen so many examples in the literatures and also in the novels that we have done over the years. Um, so this is one of the idea of the fact that this is a novel of adventure, this is a narrative of adventure, and through adventure, you learn a thing or two, and you mature, and grow mentally, and experiential. Sorry. And you grow in experience too. And you need to always remember that sometimes, and this is what they mean by experience. Can you gain experience without working? Let me ask you this question. When you go somewhere and they ask, when you go, you tell them, yeah, it's an interview, yeah, because you're graduating, obviously. So you go to interviews and you say, I have experience. And you tell them that I have experience and you were graduated or you graduated yesterday. Can it happen that you graduate today and then you go apply for a job and you say you have experience? Do you have experience this way?
No.
No,
No,
of
no,
course.
yeah, you don't have experience, right? So experience is when you work in a place and then you meet all kinds of situations, and some of them are, or part of them are perhaps adventures that you take, trying new things, taking new risks, right? So what I'm trying to say is that without adventure, you don't have this whole thing about gaining experience and gaining maturity and growing. Okay, so unless you go, and this is sometimes what they call initiation in anthropology. Uh, in some communities, I think primitive communities, like for example in Africa, in order for a boy to prove that he is no longer the boy they think he is, and he is mature and they can depend on him, he goes into a stage of what they call initiation. Initiation means that he goes to the jungle, and obviously in the jungle he fights with animals, and if he comes back safe, one solid piece, they say, yeah, you are now a man. So this is exactly what may have happened with Peter and all the Peters of the world, all the Peters, and also all of us, men and women. The fact you go out, you engage in adventure or experience, and then you come back. Obviously, you're different. You started off perhaps very innocent, you don't know much about the world, and then you go, you meet the harsh realities of life, you get exposed to all kinds of difficulties, and if you can make up and you come back, you come back more mature, right? So what do you learn? You of course you learn about the harsh realities of life, and that life is not honey and milk, right? And you can have trials and tribulations, and then you come back. You also learn about the idea of responsibility, taking responsibility for your own actions. And you also learn about the idea of consequence. You do something, you need to know that there are consequences. So before you do the thing, you need to think of the consequences. So this is what I said at the beginning, that you need to start from the end, right? You think of the consequences before you start working towards them. And that can be, if you think about it too much, you wouldn't do anything. And I'm just telling you. But you need to have this measure of planning ahead, right? So this is one of the big themes, the idea of maturity, which is part of the adventure that Peter engages in. Okay, so Peter's adventure can be interpreted as a step towards maturity and growing up, and you happen to agree with me. Yes, it is what it is. Yeah, true. Um, okay, so it's adventure that, of course, Peter is going to learn from. But if you look at it from a different angle, you would consider this disobedience. Again, disobedience in a Victorian sense, subversion of one of the values of the Victorian age. One of those big values would be the idea of obedience, the fact that you are obedient to your parents, your any authority, the government, religion, traditions, and everything in between. So, in one of the interpretations, people can think of the tale of Peter Rabbit as disobedience. So, but what kind of disobedience? Would it be disobedience in a big sense? We're talking about archetypal disobedience in the manner of Adam and Eve disobeying God by plucking from the forbidden tree and obeying the devil, Satan, and all those kinds of big things? Or is it, or this disobedience is the result of perhaps curiosity, childish and juvenile curiosity, the fact that we're talking about a child, and part of our makeup as children would be the idea of curiosity. So it can be interpreted when you look at it as disobedience and as rebellion. Obviously, the word rebellion would be big if we talk about children, because part of their nature is to, I mean, you ask your little brother or sister or your son or daughter to do something and they do something else. It's not that they disrespect you, but because they don't calculate the consequences sometimes because they are children. This is part of their nature. It doesn't make them disobedient in the grand scheme of things, in the manner of Adam and Eve and those kinds of things, right? So in this case, disobedience is um, part of their this sense of curiosity that they are born with. They don't disobey because they have they have those ideological ideas that we have as adult individuals. So
Yeah,
disobedience here can be because they are curious, and this is something that you even encourage your son or your brother or sister or your daughter to do, to be curious about the world, to ask questions. Sometimes we feel happy if if our children ask us questions. I mean, sometimes they sound very smart, right? And we keep laughing and smiling and those kinds of questions. So it's part of their makeup. So to say that this is rebellion in an archetypal sense would be reading too much into the narrative, I think. What do you think? Let's have your take on that. Sandy, what do you think? Or perhaps who would like to come and share thoughts about that? Yeah, Leanne, go ahead.
But could you repeat your question, please?
Um, I've been saying much. We're
I mean, the,
talking about, we're
I mean,
talking, wait,
the last thing. I mean, the last thing that that if I how the last thing. I mean,
okay, okay, okay. Okay, so we're talking about this idea of disobedience, and we have established the fact that disobedience is not what the values of the Victorian age. Okay, and with disobedience, comes the idea of rebellion. And rebellion can have big associations. It can invoke big things, revolutions, subverting values, and all those kinds of things. But still, can we think that what Peter did is that big? Is he the archetypal disobeyer in the manner of Adam and Eve? Or is it simply his sense of curiosity because he's a child and children are about this? We encourage curiosity for them. When he went to Mr. McGregor's garden, he went there because he was curious. He wanted to know and explore new land, and he wanted, perhaps he wanted to know why his father went and never came back. So it's this sense of curiosity that was driving him. So this is juvenile innocence, and we shouldn't read too much into it. This is one of the interpretations I mean. Are you getting my point?
Yes, he has a sense of curiosity, and not to the extent of what Adam and the Eve did.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Let's have Zuhur and then go to Sandy. Zuhur?
Yeah, his disobedience is like more innocent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you guys are suggesting that we don't read much into it. It's mere curiosity, child curiosity that we have, that we always have with children. Sandy, what do you want to say?
I do believe that we cannot compare those two together because this is a child matter. Because whenever you are a child, you are more curious about other stuff to do, and whenever our parents told us not to go there or not to do that, so we would like to do it. Not like يعني, let's say there will not be a big in Arabic we say يعني I forgot the word.
Mhm.
There will not be big circumstances if we do this, but when
Mm.
we are old enough, we know that there will be circumstances,
You mean consequences?
consequences. Yes,
Yes. تبعات. They call it تبعات.
yes, like
نتائج.
and Eve, they knew that something would happen if they do this. But for Peter, he doesn't know what will happen. That's why he went through it.
Absolutely. That's a good point that you're making. Yes, and it's about the knowledge or the foreknowledge. You know beforehand what the consequences are. Which what happened with Adam and Eve. They knew full well what would result in what they were about to do. But for Peter, he is, because it's mere curiosity. It's he is driven by the urges to know. He wanted to know. So if you want to know, it means that you don't know, right? You don't know the consequences of what you're doing, right? Yeah,
Yes,
that's a
exactly.
very interesting take on that. Thank you all. Okay, so let's again talk about the idea of disobedience, whether in a big sense or a small sense. Do you think disobedience is treated? Is it punished, for example, in this narrative? Look at what happened to Peter and tell me, is disobedience condemned, or what you condemned means that it is, I mean, something happened at the end that show us that perhaps the writer is not happy about what Peter did. What do you think? Okay, Zuhur.
Yes, I think it has both. Like it's treated as he gain more experience and he grow, but he also like suffered through the adventure and lost his jacket and become sick. So it has
So,
both.
okay, okay, thank you. Sandy?
It's the same idea as Zuhur said, but I only wanted to add that at the beginning he was afraid and everything, like he lost everything, he was in the sieves and everything. But at the end, when he became more mature, he knew how to walk, when to walk, when to run. He knew how to get in and get out from the garden. So we can say that it had consequences, but at the same time, and he got mature from it. So
Yes.
it's good and
But
a
you
bad.
don't, you don't believe that يعني, consuming or drinking only chamomile tea at the end while his sisters are eating other kinds of food is punishment for what he did. You don't think that this is punishment, right?
I do believe it is because even when he came back, like his mother didn't even talk to him. She
Hmm.
didn't point on it, so she already knew what his son did, but she didn't want like to make a big deal of it. But they
Hmm.
just get through it.
Hmm. So there is a condemnation of a sort, right, of what he did.
Yes,
That's interesting. By the way, everyone is entitled to his opinion, provided that you back it up with evidence or justifications, by the way. Okay. I think I'll stop on this note and with this item, and I'll give you time if you have any questions. Yeah, Leanne, go ahead.
Could you please send us the slides that you explained from yesterday?
Yeah, I will, inshallah. Okay, I will.
Thank you.
Okay. So I would like to share, I don't know where to put the recording of today to the other groups. Sandy, do you have a WhatsApp group for your session?
yes, I do.
Okay, so I'll share the recording with you, and I would like you to give it to your colleagues in your WhatsApp group because it's a master class, but they should know, they should have it.
Okay.
You belong with Dr. Mohsen or with Dr. Arwa?
No, Dr. Mahsen.
Okay, do we have people from Dr. Arwa's class?
Doctor, we can share it between us, the student, and then we will make it reach to them.
طيب ماشي ممتاز. طيب any other questions?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Doc.
Layan, you're raising your hand.
Why many novels and stories are um, are are shorter than movies يعني because I noticed that some movies are longer than the stories, especially for children maybe. For example, Snow White and the Tale of Peter Rabbit. Yeah, and the movie about Peter Rabbit is about half an hour, but the story is much shorter. But why? What do you think?
Well, it's simply because with stories and novels, you have only one author. But with movies, you have the original author, you have the novelist, and you also have the director. And obviously, the two of them have different visions. Okay, and of course, with cinema, you have it has to be more, it has to be more vivid and richer. You can add lots of scenes and situations. So in a novel, the plot can be given in I mean, when you talk about the summary of a novel yourself, you can say it in a few lines. And obviously, that wouldn't work with the cinema because you have cinema goers, people who pay for tickets and they want to stay at least for an hour and a half. That's why the director sometimes, exaggerates certain situations so that and expands on them, they become bigger. Or sometimes he or she adds to the work itself from his imagination because he is another creator of the work. I think this is the reason why in cinemas and movies it's bigger than you see it in its original format as a novel or as a short story. Okay, Zuhur.
Doctor, I understand the story, but how should I study it for the exam? And this course in general, how will study it?
We normally have, when we talk about it, we come up with questions and concerns and turn those questions into essays. Write down. If we talk about the idea of maturity and growth, write about it and give examples. This way you can organize your thoughts and you know everything about it. Okay, you look at the videos, you're part of our discussions, of course, which is good. You look at the slides, you read the articles, and then you form opinions and views about all of them. And if you would like to try your hand writing essays and paragraphs, that would help you a great deal.
Thank you,
Okay?
Doctor.
You're
Yeah,
welcome. Sandy?
Doctor, is it going to be like part A, like analyzing a picture or analyzing a text?
Yeah, part of it would be this, yes, whether in the midterm or in the final. You normally, but it's normally a choice that you have to make. You either write essays or you sometimes it's not mandatory. But yeah, this is part of it. Close reading, where part of the close reading can be a picture, yes.
And I also wanted to ask, please, about the quiz because we don't have the schedule until now. So quiz it's going to be?
Either week 4 or 5. Let me check my calendar and I'll have it posted, inshallah, on the LMS. If not today, tomorrow, inshallah. Because I have to tell our other colleagues to prepare you for the quiz.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome. طيب يا جماعة, on this item and with this note, we come to the end of this lovely meeting, and I'll see you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor. Bye bye.
وعليكم
Doctor.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.